Gold is near all-time highs. Has it reached its peak? Did you miss the boat? No, I don't think so. The exploding debt, change in the interest rate cycle, political and economic turmoil have caused the current move in gold, and those things are getting worse. In fact, Citibank projected gold to hit $3,000 an ounce over the next 12 to 18 months. I encourage you to protect and grow your investment portfolio with gold. I trust Dr. Kirk Elliott with Sovereign Advisors. With over 25 years of experience and 2 PhDs, Kirk Elliott is the best of the best in the industry. Call his office at 720-605-3900 and tell him Sean Morgan sent you, or just click on the link in the description to get that free consultation.
Welcome to Sunday Scriptures for Patriots. I'm your host, Sean Morgan. Got my co-host, Barry Durmaz, and his daughter, Victoria Durmaz here. We are in part 2 of Masculine Christianity, exploring the Christian roles in the family and how it relates to being an American with self-governance, overcoming America's enemies, to self-governance within the family context. And Barry, last episode, you want to give us a recap of what we went over?
Yes, Sean, thank you. Good morning, good day, good evening, whoever is listening at what time. And so last week, we broached the subject that we want to get into, and that's masculine Christianity. And it will be good to unpack what we mean by that and what the author of the book by that title, Masculine Christianity by Zachary Garris. I do recommend people get that publication. And in doing so, Sean, I referenced another volume that I have in my library here, How Christianity Changed the World, okay, by Alvin Schmidt. And there was one particular chapter germane to this subject about women receive freedom and dignity, okay? And so I'm actually rereading portions of this one chapter. And what I want to do today is to just further make a contrast. You know, we've done numerous episodes where we're making contrast between the old world of Europe and the new world of America, all right? And I want to drill down a little bit of that today because I'm really caring for the females in our audience. And I have Victoria here with me in part because of that. I have 4 daughters, and then with my wife, that's 5 women in my home, Sean. And I want both the men and the women to hear from me that I'm on a mastery path, okay, of getting the woman and the man question right.
And that's difficult to do. I know, I grew up with 2 sisters and a mother, and I'm married, and I just know how human relationships are difficult, whether it's even friendships, whether it's men hanging out. We'll get into fist fights when we get into an argument sometimes. But yeah, men and women, I mean, we've got different brains. We've got different ways of seeing the world, and there's just kind of inherent conflict within that. So yeah, it's not easy. So I really commend you for going down that path to try to figure it out.
Well, Sean, thank you for that. And, we're enjoying the journey together. And there's just the God that we serve. If we're really serving him, he is a God of order. And in fact, not only order, but well-ordered liberty, okay? And that means that we're free in Christ to do good on his land today. But that freedom and that liberty is never to do wrong. It's never to abuse. And so it's good, Sean, in this today's episode that we just really make it clear that there are abuses. There's no denying that's been going on since the garden, for crying out loud. Okay, 6,000 plus years. We're not denying that. No, and as we bring a course correction, as we make our contribution, there are many who have dealt with the subject, as many subjects out there. All right, we are required in our generation to take possession of the gospel of Christ in all of its implication, and one of them is definitely about the family And I'm talking about the American Christian family. That's what this program is largely about, is self-government. And that's a Christian idea that it flourished the most here in America. Okay. And Victoria, I'd like, as we get into this and introduce, review this, Victoria, you want to say hi to our audience?
Hello, I'm Victoria. I'm honored to be here today.
Yes, Victoria, thanks for being here. And how old are you?
I just turned 21 last week.
You did. On what day was that?
Congrats.
That was on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, Thanksgiving.
Nice.
So she's our Thanksgiving baby, but they all are blessings and thanks. And so Victoria is here in part because of evidence. Everything hangs on evidence, Sean. And so there's evidence out of my home that good has been going on here, as I've been saying, for 25 years. Okay. And so you're going to get to hear from her a little bit here. And I just want the audience to hear some of
I really appreciate that, Barry, because, I know your family, not for that long, but I've interacted with all of your family members. And if you were just a guy on a podcast, frankly, I wouldn't trust you that much. But you are a guy I know, and I've seen the evidence of the fact that you're walking the walk. And not just you, but all your family members are walking, talking testimonies that this whole system of following the Bible for your family governance actually works. So, and Victoria's, her maturity and her quiet leadership that she has within the family is a testimony of that. So I'm glad to have her on the show, because a lot of people probably started to get annoyed that two men are just constantly talking about the women's role without having a woman's perspective. And now here we are.
Yes. And yes, it is good, because in this episode and forthcoming, we're not shy about talking about some very hard and difficult things. And again, Sean, I welcome listeners to make comments wherever you're watching this, whatever video platform or audio platform. Get a hold of us, bring forward your questions. We want to be very practical. All right. And so here's something, I mentioned last week that we've become quite ungrateful. Women are feeling like they're just not getting the justice due them. And I just put a little question mark on that, Sean. I'm like, really? Do you know your history? Do we know our history of what Jesus Christ has been doing in the earth since he came? And then second to that, do we know the history in our own country, America? And we're going to get into that a little bit more here today. And I want to give an example. Last week, I was talking about how in other countries, Sean, that women, prior to the arrival of Christ, women were mistreated, abused. And I want to give an example out of the Muslim world. Okay. Now, not only can I read a little bit about this, but I am a father, but I am the son to my father, who is a native from Turkey. That's a Muslim country. And although it is nominally Muslim, it's not, they have issues there, and it's kind of an anomaly in the Middle East, right? But now there's plenty of Middle Eastern countries like Iraq and Saudi Arabia. And even to this day, come on, the women, what do we know about the women there when they're out in public?
You're right. Well, in Iran and Saudi Arabia, where it's more strict, they have to do face coverings that are pretty.
Yes, exactly, the burqa.
Saudi Arabia, it's everything except for the eyes. And Iran, they can show the face, but it's a lot more restrictive than the Western world.
So Sean, look at this. Okay, that's right. The women. All right. Well, okay. This is their religion. This is their view of life there. And it's here in America. There are Muslims. See, now this is a free country. You can come here, all right, from any parts of the world. My parents, both from Europe. But now, when we were in Florida for 4 years, one of the things that we did to provide for our family is that I ran a delivery service for a farm. And so in a little town of Live Oak, Florida, I every Thursday, I went down to the main cities of Tampa and a lot of cities on the way there, and then to Jacksonville. I was in these big cities, Clearwater. All right. In particular, Jacksonville, Florida, we had customers there that were Muslim families. And I got to tell you, the first time they ordered and they, were bringing their order and they showed up, it takes you, you get touched with the fact that the women, they're all in black from head to toe
of Florida.
Yes, Sean, and you don't see anything but the slit to see their eyes. They're in black bed sheets in a way, the way it looks. And I'll tell you, that is strange. And then interacting with them, talking with them, it's like, there's something fundamentally wrong with that. Okay. So that's here in America. All right. And our law does not require them to do that. Our American common law that's based on the scriptures. Okay. But now they're living according to their law, their Islamic Sharia law. And so I just want our audience to see right here in America that we have a contrast of the pagan world of false lawgivers like Muhammad and others versus here in this country, women have received their dignity. They are equal with men, clearly like that. They can be in public, excuse me, in settings and not look like the men are ashamed of their women covered like that. All right. So
can I give the opposition's advocate here, which is the modern feminist American woman would say, oh, Barry, big deal that in America, women have the freedom to not be covered in bed sheets. We want the freedom to have abortions, and we want the freedom to be CEOs and presidents and not be sexually harassed in the workplace. And these are the challenges that we have in the 21st century, Barry. It's not to not be covered like the Muslim world.
Well, there are answers for all of that. And we're going to get into that as we get into the book and this subject of masculine Christianity. But to answer you, though, Sean, it's the reason why it's important we're taking time to look at things historically. We're going to look at things biblically and theologically. And in fact, this book by Zachary Garris, I commend him. It is a phenomenal work, this book, Masculine Christianity. However, it is a theological work, and it's worth your read. One of the things I see that he doesn't do is that he brings a historical perspective as far as what's going on outside of the church. So a lot of men, when they're teaching about history, it's all about church history. And that's right. But here's the problem with that. When you're only teaching church history, it's as if God's only working in the church, in a meeting, and only in the Bible. And then Holy Spirit is kind of, we acknowledge him as the third person of the Trinity. He's God, the Holy Spirit. But that we need to have the experiential, the subjective side. And that's what history is. Your personal history, mine, those who are listening, we all have our history. The question that we want to bring forward, and we want to have evidence, this is key, evidence, is it a Christian history? Is Christ doing things, not what we're doing, is he doing things through us? All right. So that's a good point. Sorry, I think you were about to bring it to this point, is that if a woman's saying, I want the right to control my body through having an abortion, they're cutting out the Christian perspective there. This is a worldly, ego-based theology. This is not bringing in the Spirit. That's right. Yes. What's happening there is women have the power to do all kinds of things. But the question is, did God design them to do those things? Did he give them authority to do those things? And that's what this study that we're going to go into is going to unpack, that the differences in the genders in role and responsibility and duty. So we want to make this contrast that women receive under Christ in his glorious gospel of the kingdom, his law, which is a law of liberty and love and light. Under that, women receive the utmost freedom and dignity to do good. Okay. And it's not on their terms to do good. It's what the Lord, their creator, says to do good. And if he says women shouldn't be looking like men, dressing like men, going to war to defend the men, no.
Actually, Barry,
no.
that's what the left is proposing now, is to draft women into the military.
And that's a sign of judgment. And it's a judgment on the men as well, because when men are being acting more like women. And I want to get into that here just a little bit as we further introduce this. And so I'm going to read some things from Zach's book, just in the introduction. Okay. But you're asking the excellent question. And we want to just see there's a distinction between, you have the power, but see, if you are a born again woman, Jesus Christ is in you as virtue to not go beyond your delegated jurisdiction. And that's important, ladies, because if you're concerned about what's going on in the nation, in your state, in the church, the corruption didn't begin there. See, those people that are hurting us, hurting our families in many, many, many ways, they are not restraining themselves. Yeah, they have the power to do what they're doing, but the question is, do they have the authority? Okay, the authority. And that's the beautiful thing, Sean. So as I come forward with my family here, like with Victoria, there is beauty here that the women in my family are not doing everything they could do, but they are doing what they should do under the leadership of their father. And to your point, Victoria, she's my firstborn, my oldest. She is an example. And by her example, she's an example to the younger ones. She always has been. And by that, you're leading, right? Would you consider that a form of leadership?
Yes.
Yes.
Leadership by example. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
That's what Christ taught, right? I mean,
yes.
Seriously, I mean, the New Testament is just like reading the leadership by example, That's kind of the concept of Christ's teaching, is what he did and was more than what he opened his mouth and didactically instructed.
Yep. His manner of life that we're to take on. This is all to say, Sean, that we're in a time right now when I will say the average woman, certainly not all women, but the average woman today is without dignity. Okay. And men, the contrast to that is men without conscience and character. Okay.
What do you mean by women without dignity?
Well, thanks for asking me. If you look in Webster's 1828, dignity, he's got quite a bit there about dignity, but what captures my attention is that dignity is true honor. Okay. A dignified person is going to bestow honor on where honor is due. Romans 13 says we give honor to whom honor, where it's due. And there's a breakdown in the family marital union where we're hard pressed to find women who really honor their husbands, not speaking ugly, not being contentious, not, rattling off things, okay, that are strife oriented. So dignity is honor. We need women of honor. Victoria, what do you?
And we need men of honor too.
Yes.
But you're saying there's a specific emphasis
yes.
that you're seeing a lack of conscience in men and a lack of dignity in women in our modern culture.
Yes, that is true. And why say conscience on the men? Because you see, men will complain about things they don't like, but it's rare to find a man who will take action, meaning his conscience is bothering him to the point where he's going to do something about it. See, in Ephesians chapter 4, it says, be angry, but don't sin. Don't be lawless in your anger. That's what sin is, lawlessness. So with the anger, when the Lord shows us what's wrong with things under our jurisdiction, okay, we can't start it in the White House. We can't start at the State House. Can't start at the courthouse or the schoolhouse. No, the key to America's freedom begins in my house, your house, the listeners, audience. Your house is key to America's freedom. And there, that is meaning, one, that the man is exercising his conscience and the authority to correct what's out of order. That takes courage. So the conscience is like, I'm moved, I'm angry, and then the authority is to do it in such a way that Jesus is there bringing order to the confusion. And that's where the taking our country back, throwing it off our enemies, begins in a man's home with him exercising conscience and courage, and his wife, if he has a wife, with dignity to honor him as that higher position, but they are equal. And so that's what I mean about that, the dignity, so that she honors her husband. She's not trying to do what her husband has been called to do, because that's a man role, but she has her role, and it's a vital role. It's a very vital role of being the executive assistant. Okay.
And so, there are other roles too. I mean, when you have children, to care for your children.
Yes, yes, sir. So now look at this, Sean. This book, Masculine Christianity, I'm going to read a sentence or two that sets up what this book is about. And the author, Zachary Garris, he says that this book is anti-feminist and it is patriarchal. And so here's what he says, is that this book affirms the historic interpretations and refutes the feminist revisions. It does not deal with critical feminists who dismiss passages of the Bible they do not like, but it engages evangelical feminists who claim to embrace the authority and inerrancy of the Bible. Okay, so
right, that's where we're stuck, isn't it, in our Christian culture, where we kind of give lip service to the Bible and then go do what the world does, right?
Yes, but this is important for us to frame this like this, is that we're not going to get bogged down with the hardcore feminists who they don't acknowledge the authority of the scripture. We know, we see them for who they are. The more this, we want to deal with the vastly more subtlety of this antichrist doctrine of feminism, and that is where it is in the church and in our families, that it's not overtly looking like it's trying to disturb things and destroy, but it is. And that's why I see that this book was written, is that we want to appeal to our listeners where they may be accommodating the evil empire through feminism. Right.
Yeah, and this is how I met you, Barry, is that I was having issues in my marriage, and I was trying to solve the problems in my marriage, and I was causing the problems in my marriage based on an ego, prideful perspective, instead of using the Bible as my guide. Instead of talking to my wife and saying, "Hey, we're having this conflict, and the source of the conflict is that we're not following the Bible." Instead of saying the source of our conflict is that you're not following me and I'm the authority because I said so, instead of saying, hey, we have a system here. We're both supposed to be Christians. We're both supposed to be believing in this whole design of the family, and neither one of us are following that guide. Let's follow that guide together. And so that's what I learned from you, to bring that to marriage and family conflicts, is to bring the Christian rule book, the design, God's design for the family, to solve those conflicts. I think it would be a good time to bring in Victoria's perspective. I know you have a lot of things that you want to read and cover, Barry, but I know that our audience is going to give us a really hard time if we leave Victoria on the sidelines being quiet the whole time. So Victoria, hopefully you've heard most of the episodes that we've recorded. We've laid a lot of groundwork, and you're a student of your father's study of family governance and everything. I'm curious, do you notice when I'm kind of hosting the show that I'm always talking about the modern American culture, and I'm always talking about the problems in politics and families and so forth? Because I think it's possible that the community you live in rural Pennsylvania, with a lot of Mennonites and Amish, and the community of your family, is like this bubble of people it's just different from you step into the nearby cities where you live, like Harrisburg or whatever, and people are living a completely different lifestyle uh, in the home. They're watching TV, they're watching Netflix, they're being brainwashed by this kind of evil satanic culture, to be honest. So what is your perspective on all of that outside culture? Is it tempting at all to you to want to go to that, to explore it? Or what value do you see in your family governance now compared to that culture?
Well, when I see how, like, sometimes when I watch or listen to news of what is going on in the world and the different problems of our culture, it makes me a lot more grateful for how my father has raised me and raised my siblings. It makes me very grateful that he has given us a biblical foundation, and that my father, desires to do everything according to God's law, his order, the way God designed it. And I realize how wonderful God's order is. And it is my delight to fulfill my role, my place, my jurisdiction within that order.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give two examples, an example of the problems that are caused by not following the biblical view? And can you give an example of how God's order really works in your family?
So you're asking me to talk about the problems that follow as a result of not following God's order? Yeah,
just one example,
yes,
maybe from the news.
Okay, let me help you out on this, because we can with Sean's question, we can springboard into this right here.
Yes.
Let me just, Sean, in her answering that, Victoria is working on a research project, and what that is after a good chunk of years of home education, a Christian education, I'm having her and then Joy, our second born, do a thesis. All right. I'm letting them choose a subject of their heart's desire that here towards their end of their primary education, not their end of their education, but just this initial foundation of their Christian education, to bring forth a subject of basically what you're asking is, what is a problem? Where's the breakdown of God's order, the disobedience, and the consequence of that? And then what is the superior solution? All right. And so we brought some material here to bring to today's episode. So why don't you, Victoria, go ahead and bring forth what we have here, because and deal with the thesis that you're working on.
Sure. And feel free to bring up any other examples that are on your mind. You can definitely give two examples.
Well, to go back to your question, the problems that are caused by not following God's order, we see that for one thing that's very big is the LGBTQ and all the perversion there and the confusion that is resulted there as from not seeing God's order of the man and the woman.
Yeah.
And it creates so much confusion and disorder. It's appalling. And I wish that these people could only see I wish their hearts were open to see how wonderful God's order is, and how it is very much liberating and freeing. To
a quick note to give context to what you're saying is that transgendered people commit suicide higher than any other group of people.
No wonder. Yes. It would only bring more confusion and despair and disorder into their lives.
So Victoria, you want to give specificity as to what kind of individual? Yeah. So having said that's a breakdown of God's order, people who are rebelling. What do we have biblically, but then historically in America that addresses that.
Yes. So my thesis, what I chose my thesis is, the subject that I chose my thesis to be about is the American Christian woman. And in my thesis, in the process of researching and studying my thesis, I am contrasting and comparing the American Christian woman at the founding of America, the kind of woman that built this country, with the American woman of today. And so,
Could you give me an example?
yes.
Yes.
Because I really don't know anything about the women that founded our country. My education was lacking on that.
Yes. Well, for example, I did write a long list of specific women. Let me think of one, for example. One would be Eliza Lucas Pinckney. Have you ever heard that name?
I don't think so.
She is, during the 1700s, she is the mother of two of the founding fathers. But she, at 16 years old, she was in full charge of two of her father's plantations. I believe he had two or three, and she was in full charge of those plantations, managing them, while her father was out. I don't recall what he was doing, but he was doing some other work, I believe in another country, and she was in charge of the plantations at home here in colonial America. And she had very much an entrepreneurial mindset, very visionary. And she, in fact, she started the trade of indigo, I believe it was, in America. She had the vision to see that this could potentially be a very profitable trade. And it took her several years of experiments and failings before she finally was able to cultivate enough indigo to export it. So that she's a prime example of.
Yes, and actually, Sean, there's another one I want her to share. We were talking last night about Molly Pitcher.
Yes.
That got my attention. Now,
Molly
did you find
Pitcher.
the picture on that one? Did you find the picture?
No, there are different depictions of Molly Pitcher.
Okay, this is precious. And so tell us about Molly Pitcher. Who is this woman?
Her real name is Mary Hayes. She's known as Molly Pitcher because when her husband was a soldier, he was a gunner in the Revolutionary War, and she followed him to the battlefield. And during the battles, she would be providing water to the soldiers. And so when a soldier wanted water, he would call to her, Molly Pitcher, and she would bring the pitcher of water to him. And so hence she was given the nickname of Molly Pitcher. And that's the name she is most commonly.
So many women like that in all the wars throughout history who were there by the side to support, and they were in the line of fire as well.
Yes. Yeah. And what happened in the story of Molly Pitcher is that during one battle, the Battle of Monmouth, her husband was actually killed, and a superior officer was going to order the cannon to be removed from the battle because there was no one to man it. But Molly was right there, and she said that she would take over the cannon, and she did so until the battle's end. I know her husband was just killed, but she had the presence of mind and the strength and courage of heart to take her husband's place. And afterwards, George Washington actually, he made her a non-commissioned officer, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, those are two examples of women who, they stepped up when they needed to support, so it's not like in Christian culture or American culture, women don't have that ability to have that delegated to them when needed, especially when men are absent or not doing what they need to do, then they become the executives.
Yes.
Yeah, this is why we're broaching the subject now of masculine Christianity, that we have these heroic stories of women. I mean, that's just scratching the surface. But we want to, and the documentation is there for people. We have to be willing to set aside the pleasure-oriented lifestyle wherever it applies. You know, there's a lot of things that we do, Sean, that are not sin. Sports, movies, and other activities. Okay. But at the same time, I've been challenged years ago. These things, all of them do become sin when they interfere with the maturity and progress of our life in Jesus Christ.
When we use it as a distraction or an addiction to avoid the spiritual growth. I would like to provide a modern day example of where we're at in our culture right now. It's something that personally shocks me. Is I heard a story of an admissions counselor at a community college who said that 1 out of 5 girls at the community college was prostituting themselves online through this new website called OnlyFans, where you can set up a webcam in your own home and you charge a subscription fee to men who want to watch you in pornographic ways. So this is just a judgment upon our modern culture, not just women, but the men who are participating in this and the pornography addiction. You know, when you compare that to the 2 women that you mentioned who were heroically, caring for their families and the very survival of their families. And that was their number one priority, was their families, service to their families. Whereas this modern culture that enables this example I give, this very shocking example, but it's reality. It's the truth of the culture that we live in, is it's so selfish. I mean, the money is just so easy and you don't have to work for it. It indulges your own sinful fallen nature. That's why women, apparently at a statistic in that community of 1 out of 5 young women, are choosing the path of the lowest moral path you could possibly go down, of prostitution. So some people would say, Victoria, we have women who fight in wars in the modern day. We have women entrepreneurs in the modern day, and that's true. There are examples of heroic women today as well. But I would like people to contrast those 2 women to the women that I'm describing as more of an average. The average colonial woman was in service to her family. And unfortunately, that the average young woman today is in service to herself in our culture.
Yes. Yeah, the colonial women, they had, as actually, let me quote Alexis de Tocqueville here in his Democracy of America. He said that the women of America who often exhibit a masculine strength of understanding and a manly energy, generally preserve great delicacy of personal appearance and always retain the manners of women, although they sometimes show that they have the hearts and minds of men. And so these women, they were very strong, and they had to be the pioneers and to forge this country.
I'm thinking of the settlers and the pioneers, exactly, where there was a lot of work to do, right? There was more work than there were members of the family. And so women pitched in and did what they need to do. And I can contrast that to maybe England, where there were just kind of centuries of tradition that prevented, perhaps, to the extent that the colonial women did that type of labor.
Yes, the women that came over here with their husbands, these were the ones that had the strength of character and the strength of mind. And we just had Thanksgiving, and you think of the Pilgrim women who came over. I believe there were 18 women. I just learned this. And during that first winter, when it was very hard for them and they had sickness and they did not have sufficient food and shelter, but only 4 of the Pilgrim Women actually survived to the next year. And these women, they sacrificed themselves for the next generation, for they had such a far-seeing vision beyond just their own personal comfort right in the present moment.
It's faith,
had the
isn't
foresight, yes, to
you're mentioning all these other characteristics that are true, like strength of mind, strength of character, strength of body, but there's a spiritual strength for all of the American people to take that risk to go across the ocean and try to survive. That makes our culture and our very genetics, oriented towards that type of ruggedness, I guess, compared to the European kind of. Look at modern Europeans. It's like just sitting around letting the government take care of them, whereas the Americans have more of an entrepreneurial individual.
yes.
Sean, we're reading. We're reading here Democracy in America, which is written by Alexis de Tocqueville. He was a Frenchman that came here in the 1830s, and he made a lot of observations. And that's a classic work. People ought to read it. They ought to get it on audio, which you can get free if you go to, I think it's LibriVox.com.
Yes, you can listen to it.
I listened to this whole thing in Japan. I'm in the forest with a nonprofit organization doing forest management, and I'm listening to this thing while I'm cutting down bamboo trees. And after a while, I started shouting, because what he does in this volume of his is he's contrasting. He is saying the old world is this, but in the new world of America, it's this. The old world, the new world, the old world. And it took some time to hear that for it to just light up in me. Like, this country is unlike any, it is new. It's never been done before. It doesn't need to be the last like this, but it's certainly the first in the history of nation making, where people govern themselves under good law to do good without asking permission for strangers.
Yes.
So one of the things he does here, I was reading last night, is that, and this is to encourage the women even more so than what we're saying, and that is to be grateful. Look at this. In the old world, and let's talk about marriage for a minute here. Prearranged marriages was pretty common in the old world. It was even common in Israel, ancient Israel. Like, this is just how it was done. And the parents
still
had
in India, in the East today. I mean, how common? It's super common.
Isn't it amazing? We forget, I'm forgetting this, but it's helping me to see, whoa, that how that the point of that is that the girl in question that was going to get married to a man because the parents brought the deal together, right? She didn't have to think about too much about the man, because that was taken away from her. It was the parents. Okay. When you read Alexis de Tocqueville about marriages in America, the women, because the parents didn't do that here, what happened is the young girls, through their studies, they're having to think through, what kind of man do I want to attach myself to? What kind of intelligence? What kind of gentleman? Okay. And this is a Frenchman. Like, there's a lot of credibility here. He's not American. He comes here. Of all the observations, there's a lot here. He's contrasting that in America, the women, they are more educated. They are more learned than their counterparts in he says many other countries. Okay. So that in America, there's a greater independence of the woman. Of course, she's the young girl is growing up in a family, but there's an independent spirit here in America, so that young girl, she has to cultivate and inculcate in her mind, where is she going to covenant with a man for the rest of her life? What's that going to look like? So she has to put more effort into it, and she has the liberty to do that, so that when she gets married, she's going to be satisfied that I took the time to know for myself, and that that needs to weigh on us, that on the women, to like, look, ladies, the point is, you live here in this country, you have the freedom to figure out what kind of man you wanted to help support. And if there's any lamenting about that now, that needs to be addressed.
Well, I think there's a lot of lamenting in the modern day, a lot of lonely women who are going on the, and not just women, but we're talking about women right now, going on the dating apps and going on a bunch of dates with a bunch of different guys. And they want a husband. They want a family. That's part of their hearts and soul's desire. But they're going about it in a worldly way instead of a spiritual way. And so they end up with going on a bunch of worldly dates with worldly men. And it's like spiritual poverty. Because they end up being lonelier and lonelier, and they're never satisfied because they never find exactly what they want, because they're trying to fulfill their ego instead of their soul and spirit. And they're not oriented towards service and support. They're oriented towards service to themselves. And this could definitely apply to men as well. Let's talk about pride for a second here, because you keep talking about how, in this example, because we're talking about women, that perhaps the antidote to this modern problem is gratitude. And I keep thinking to myself, yeah, these feminists, Barry, it doesn't matter how many times you tell them they need to be grateful for what they have now in our modern times. They're not going to be grateful. They're going to demand more and more and more. And they're going to demand not just equality. They're going to demand superiority and domination, because what are we dealing with here? What is the sin? Is it pride? Is that the sin, that the antidote is gratitude? What is the sin here that makes someone not only want equality, but want to dominate?
That is, from my perspective, looking at the scriptures, Lucifer, who was a beautiful angel, right? This is before, the created order. Of course, there's the heavenly creation, but that beautiful angel, Lucifer, was elevated in pride. He wasn't content. Now look at this, Sean. He had the power. Obviously, he had the power. He says, I want to ascend like the Most High. I want to be above him. And yet he was created with such beauty, instrumentation in his being. It's there in, I believe it's in Ezekiel. That's why music is very important. Oh my God, that's putting it mildly. Music is so powerful to affect our moods. And there's the right idea of that and the wrong idea. God used David to alleviate a spirit of heaviness on Saul with his harp. Okay. Music is very powerful to be therapeutic. And at the same time, I've listened to studies where with lab rats that when you played rock and roll music, they cannibalized each other. All right.
My God. So you think Lucifer was a musician for the Lord?
That's right. Yep. Basically the chief worship leader in the heavenlies, all the angels worshiping him. And so he had a lot of attention, I suppose, a lot of ooh, look at the position I got. But his heart was lifted up in pride and he was cast down. So he had the power to say what he did, to do what he did, but did he have the authority? Well, we know the answer to that. And so there you have it, Sean, is that we want to get clear on what God has designed us to do as men and as women. And then we have authority to do that.
So if
do more.
If Lucifer would have been grateful for being the most beautiful, the most
archangel,
all of these different talents and gifts and privileges that Lucifer had, if he would have been grateful, it would have prevented the fall. And so that's kind of applies to our human order as well, that if we can be grateful for how God designed us, for the role and responsibilities and duties that we have, for the gifts and privileges that we have, then we won't be lifted up in pride, because pride always destroys, doesn't it? It destroys marriages, it destroys families, it destroys everything in its path, doesn't it?
Destroys yourself.
It does. In fact, God says in James that he resists the proud man. First of all,
it destroys your relationship with God, right? It deteriorates that. So it's not possible if God's resisting you.
That's right. That got a hold of me some years ago. I have enough of my own weaknesses and troubles and just basic sin, for pride to be the sin. No, I cannot have my creator resisting me. I need to conform because I want to get my prayers answered. I must, and I do. I have to increasingly get my prayers answered. And every head of household ought to be moved with that, because if you wonder why you're not getting your prayers answered, if you're even praying, is pride is the answer first and last, that we want to deal with that. And the antidote to pride is true humility, not, beating yourself over, whatever, flagellating yourself and all that kind of thing. No, it's coming under the mighty hand of God. Get out. It's his word, and submitting yourself to the written law word of our King.
And saying, I'm a sinner and I'm sorry and I need you.
Yes, sir.
So that dependence.
Yes. We're highly dependent on our Creator, our King, and our Savior. Okay. So yeah, pride, Sean, it's good to talk about this regularly, because this is we have national pride, which is sinful. You can, there's a lot of God bless America. Yeah, well, the murder of the unborn is happening. The theft of our currency. The Federal Reserve is a institutional stronghold where we are being robbed of true wealth. You can't even own land. The taxes on that. And Sean, I'm not consenting to that. There are solutions to that, and they're coming forward. Okay, but those are institutional strongholds. It is theft and it is murder. And let this word go out where it will. And I just ask people to share this content.
Yes.
That Sean and I are doing, share our what we're doing, my family, please, we're doing things with, part of me, half of me is Scottish. And if you know anything about the Scots, there's this thing about they can squeeze two pennies together and make them cry or something like that, just like they're really tight. But no, though things are lean materially here and financially, we have world overcoming. What you already said, Sean.
Harmony in the home is priceless, right? I mean, you can be a millionaire, and if you have division and divorce in your marriage, in your home, you have nothing really. So harmony is everything. Now, I also ask the Lord to bless your family with provision and so forth. That's also a sign of God's blessing. So we don't have too much time left in this episode, but I do want to mention something I'm very excited about in the world, which is in El Salvador, the president is proposing a special jurisdiction within the country called Bitcoin City. Yeah. And he's going to have zero taxes except for 10% sales tax. And I'm just excited that this topic of financial liberty and economic liberty that we've been talking about in these episodes, that it's blossoming somewhere. If not in America right now, then perhaps in the future. And I really am inspired by the fact that there's even any jurisdiction in the entire world right now where those concepts of economic liberty are being seriously not just considered. I mean, they are launching the city. It is happening. It's a multi-billion-dollar Bitcoin bond that's going to be funding the city. They've got a volcano to provide the energy and so forth. So it is happening in the earth, this idea of economic liberty. And it doesn't just happen in America. It's where we did the first experiment. It's where it flourished. That's why America's number one economically in the world and has been for a long time. But hey, if we let go of these principles, then we're going to lose the economic liberty. So I just wanted to follow up with that, because I thought it does kind of tie into everything we've been talking about. I'll leave the last word for you and Victoria. Is there any final summary that you wanted to leave the audience with?
Sean, yes, we certainly do. And I'd like Victoria to read another excerpt from Alexis de Tocqueville. And so,
yes.
Victoria, you want to preface that at all, or just go into it? But what would you say?
Alexis de Tocqueville, he wrote 4 chapters about the American woman, and this is his conclusion about the American woman as he comes to a close of his work. And it's one of my favorite quotes by him. He says, Although the women of the United States are confined within the narrow circle of domestic life, and their situation is, in some respects, one of extreme dependence, I have nowhere seen women occupying a loftier position. And if I were asked, now that I am drawing to the close of this work, in which I have spoken of so many important things done by the Americans, to what the singular prosperity and growing strength of that people ought mainly to be attributed, I should reply, to the superiority of their women.
Wow, that says a lot. And Barry, this goes back to something I've been trying to emphasize in all of our conversations, is that Christ showed us those, the first shall be the last and the last shall be the first. I mean, we keep talking about this role that women play as if it's some kind of, like the audience thinks it's inferior. Like
right.
Christ lowered himself, right? In the next world, in heaven, we're going to be rewarded according to how much we were willing to humble ourselves here on earth. So, that quote, I think, kind of gets at the heart of the matter, that the true glory goes to the most humble, and women have a unique opportunity in the home government to practice Christ's model for that. So it might not get a lot of worldly glory to be in charge of the home or the children, but like we said before, harmony in the home is really truly priceless. So it depends on what you value.
Sean, if we don't have, we have evidence here in our country of the American Christian woman, and we're hard pressed to find those ladies today. I'm doing what I see clearly to do out of my own home, but to get people's real to consider, if we're not American Christian women for our ladies, what we have is pagan Christianity. Okay, a woman who's following false lawgivers. Okay, and of herself or other voices. But Jesus said, "I will not listen to the voice." He says, "My sheep know my voice, and they'll not listen to a voice of a stranger." And as we get into this in the weeks ahead of unpacking feminism, and there are all these attacks on our country, we want to contrast it, why those are happening, because America was successful. The gospel was so thoroughly implicating at the family level, the church and the family level, that it produced a nation of God-fearing men and women. And we can say that this is the American Christian family of men and women, and that's a twofold identifier. And here you have a Frenchman. My God, I mean, this is just phenomenal evidence, credibility that this foreigner made about our country. And Sean, this is what we're on the track with you on, is that to throw off our enemies, it's no farther than your own home, that the key to our freedom was that kind of home in our founding. And that's what it's going to take, is to know that our houses are key to America's freedom.
Amen. And I know we've been kind of tough on the ladies in our modern culture in this episode, but men are just as bad. We're under judgment in the modern day. Our modern culture, our modern men contrast just as the colonial women contrast with the modern day women. The modern man is nothing compared to the colonial man either.
That's right.
So, modern day men need to step up as well, and we'll be going into that in the future episodes, probably the next one.
Yes, Sean, let's have guys and women get the book Masculine Christianity, and since we're ending this out, we didn't even get into defining, because Zachary goes into this. Well, how can you call this masculine Christianity? I mean, how do you do that? Like, masculinity is about a person, and Christianity is a religion. So we can pick up there as we move forward, and talk about why can we even call this masculine Christianity. All right, that can conjure up objections, but bring them forward, folks. Bring the comments and bring your good support, because we're blazing a trail for the glory of God. However imperfectly we're doing it. And so America is going through a new beginning of its birthright to self-govern, starting from our homes.
Amen. If you guys want to tap into Barry's family and teachings, you can go to libertyisthelaw.us or libertyisthelaw.com. And you can find out about my work at seanmorganreport.com. Thank you for watching. We'll tune in next week for part 3 of Masculine Christianity. God bless, Patriots. Bye-bye.
Thank you for being a part of our Christian self-government ministry by supporting our sponsor.
A way to support the channel and be able to get a really great experience of waking up every single day with the Great Awakening Gourmet Coffee. So this is the website, thegreatawakeningcoffee.com. You go here, you click on Get Started, and then it takes you to the next step. You choose whether you're going to buy the coffee for your home or your office. So we'll just click Home for now. And the website will load here. And by the way, this company is totally Patriots owned. So that's what I really like about this company. You can choose what kind of coffee you want, ground, whole, or the K-cup. So we'll just choose ground. It's the easiest. That's the way I buy it. And then you can pick the kind that you like. I prefer the Washington blend, South America blend. Click on that. You put in the size that you want, 1 pound or 2 pound. You can subscribe so that it sends the same amount of coffee at the same time every month. And then click subscribe and save. Then click on view cart. Make sure you put in the coupon code QFAQ to get a discount. And then proceed to checkout, and you know how to handle the rest with your credit card. It's that simple. You know what's going on right now with the corporate coffee is they're donating a bunch of millions of dollars to Black Lives Matter. So ditch the corporate coffee. Check out thegreatawakeningcoffee.com. Support the Patriots. Support this channel. Thank you so much for your support. God bless.